An interview with Rife 1960. Royal Raymond Rife. Royal Raymond Rife and his engineer John Crane developed a new type of frequency therapy device, in the 50s, using electrodes placed on the body to administer the resonance waves. Just 10 years later, the AMA again struck to silence this form of therapy. In 1960, John Crane's laboratories were raided without a search warrant, years of work were either confiscated or smashed, and Crane was taken to trial in spring 1961. Although there was a large amount of evidence supporting the effectiveness of the Rife-Crane therapy, this evidence was not permitted to be used in the trial. John Crane was sentenced to 10 years in prison, of which he served 3 years and 1 month. During the preparation for this trial in 1961, the defense lawyer sent a long list of 137 highly interesting questions to Royal Rife, who was in Mexico at the time, on the research he and Crane had done. These questions and answers were also not permitted to be used in defense, and only the questions could be found aimed at the trial papers as stored in the courthouse. Today, until very recently, the answers to these questions were believed to have been lost. They have only now been found by someone who had the answers, but not the questions. The answers have been dated March 22, 1961. It contains some very interesting comments on the work of Royal Rife as he saw it himself, and answers many questions only guessed at before. Due to the poor state of the copies I received, I have typed in the questions and answers manually, as scanning was not practical. Some obvious grammatical and spelling mistakes have been corrected, and crossed-out words have been omitted, all unreadable, except where noted. Differences between British and American English, for example, tumor instead of tumor, have been left in the original American form. The answers were originally typed almost entirely in uppercase. To improve readability, the normal case has been used instead. Any comments I have added are in square brackets. Otherwise, the list of questions and answers shown here is complete and nothing has been left out. The background to the John Crane trial is told by Barry Lyne's book The Cancer Cure That Worked. By 1960, Crane had written and copyrighted a manual which explained how the frequency instrument was to be used in the experimental treatment of various diseases and on different parts of the body. By that year, 90 instruments were distributed for research and verification on notarized contracts. And then the medical authorities struck. They raided Crane's office, took over $40,000 in his machines, frequency instruments, and one large Rife ray tube instrument, along with engineering data, research records and reports, pictures off the wall, private letters, invoices, tape recordings, and electronic parts, all without a search warrant. They smashed all the research which had been put together over 10 laborious years. As in 1939, they visited the doctors who were experimenting with the machines and forced them to abandon them. They also pressured ordinary citizens who had begun experimenting on a personal basis. These visits were made by teams of investigators. One woman was scared so bad that she has been in a sanitarium, driven entirely out of her mind. Her husband cursed them out and told them to get off his property, and has threatened to exterminate them should they return. His wife has undergone shock treatments and 2 months of hospitalization. The records and materials seized were not allowed to be used by Crane in his own defense during his trial. Roy Rife, almost 73 and incapable of suffering the abuse of another trial at his age, went into hiding in Mexico. His deposition was not permitted to be introduced at the trial. Neither were the medical and scientific reports from the 1930s and 1940s. Nor were medical reports from Dr. Stafford in Ohio. Dr. Cush's letters were also declared inadmissible. No medical or scientific report which indicated the frequency instrument worked as represented was permitted to be introduced at the trial. Crane was left naked with only the patients who had been cured or helped. The trial was held in early 1961. After 24 days, and despite the testimony of 14 patients who told how the frequency instrument cured ailments and diseases which orthodox medicine could not alleviate, Crane was found guilty. The only medical opinion offered by the state of California came from Dr. Paul Shea, who had been given a frequency instrument by the Public Health Department for 2 months before the trial. Shea admitted he never tried the frequency instrument on anything or made any tests to evaluate it. He simply examined it and decided that it had no curative powers and didn't lend itself to investigative use. Also, and most disturbing, the foreman of the jury was an AMA doctor. Everyone else was carefully screened to see that they had no medical knowledge, no electronic knowledge, and didn't read any newspapers supporting alternative healing. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. Crane was sentenced to 10 years in jail. Following appeals, 2 of the 3 counts against Crane were reversed in the California Supreme Court because no specific criminal intent had been proven. But Crane still spent 3 years and 1 month in jail. The cure for cancer had been effectively suppressed again. During the trial, James Hannibal, age 76, testified. Blind in one eye, he'd been treated by the frequency instrument. After several applications, his cataract disappeared just as cataracts had dissolved in many of Dr. Milbank Johnson's patients during the 1935-37 clinics. Other witnesses at Crane's trial testified to the curing of chronic bladder irritation and the elimination of a throat lump 1/2 of the size of an egg. Also cured were fungus growths on hands, fissures in the anus, pyorrhea, arthritis, ulcerated colon, varicose veins, prostate troubles, tumorous growth over eyes, colitis, pains in the back, and heart attacks. One man testified that for 17 years he had a growth the size of an egg on his spine. After treatment, it had disappeared. After Crane was imprisoned, so much pressure was put on Dr. Stafford in Ohio that he gave up medicine and became a salesman. Another doctor in Salt Lake City had his frequency instrument sabotaged and then was hounded by the orthodox medical authorities to such an extent that he committed suicide. Such were the lengths to which the anti-Rife forces were willing to go in order to prevent the testing and use of this breakthrough technology. Questions to and answers from Royal Raymond Rife in 1960. 1. Please state your name. Royal Raymond Rife. 2. Where do you reside? As a tourist in Tijuana, Mexico, just over the border from San Diego, California. 3. Is it your intention to attend as a witness at the trial of this action? No. 4. Are you the same Royal R. Rife who invented the system of killing or deactivating pathogenic organisms by electronic waves or frequencies produced by instruments similar to those made by Mr. John Crane, one of the defendants in this case? Yes. 5. If so, when did you begin your experimental work on this system? 1915. 6. How long a period did your work cover in developing the device and the techniques of its use? From 1920 to the present time, 40 years, and development is still continuing. 7. What is the basic theory upon which you sought to find a means of killing pathogenic organisms? The theory of coordinative resonance with frequencies, which I proved would kill microorganisms by electron transfer and internal stresses of pathogenic cells owing to electromagnetic and electrostatic forces. 8. What kind of pathogenic organisms did you study in these experiments? Tetanus, typhoid, gonorrhea, syphilis, staphylococci, pneumonia, strephothrix, streptococcus, tuberculosis, sarcoma, carcinoma, leprosy, polio, cholera, actinomycosis, glanders, bubonic plague, anthrax, influenza, herpes, cataracts, glaucoma, colitis, sinus, ulcers, and many other virus, bacteria, and fungi. 9. From what sources were these organisms obtained? The Hooper Foundation, Paradise Valley Sanatorium, from Northwestern Medical University in Chicago, from the Mayo Clinic, and from many medical doctors. 10. What sort of laboratory facilities did you have for use in these experiments? I had one of the best privately equipped laboratories in the world, complete with 1,000,000-volt X-ray, frequency instruments, electronic test equipment, precision lathes, mills, drill presses, shaper, and all equipment necessary to make instruments, microscopes, glass blowing, and a surgical room for animals with sterilizers of the steam type, and a pathology room complete with microscopes of all types, virus microscopes which I had designed and built for the isolation of cancer virus, TB virus, typhoid virus, and many other virus. I had a stop-motion microscope set up for the life study of microorganisms from the cradle to the grave. I had animals in cages in the basement with facilities for 1,000 animals. The Rife Research Laboratory was air-conditioned and humidity controlled to 1/10 of 1 degree. 11. Where was your laboratory located? On Alcott Street, across the Bridges Mansion in Point Loma. 12. Did you study viruses, among other pathogenic organisms? Yes. 13. Were any special instruments required for your study of viruses? Yes. 14. What were they? prismatic virus microscopes and Berkefeld porcelain filters, a micromanipulator and electronic test instruments and frequency instruments. 15. Were all of these obtained from ordinary commercial sources? No, I could not buy them on the open market and they are still not obtainable even today. 16. If some were not obtainable from ordinary commercial sources, how did you obtain them? I had to design and build these instruments to accomplish what I wanted to attain with my research. 17. Who designed these? I designed them. 18. Where were they made? In the Rife Research Laboratory. 19. Describe these special instruments for us. The universal microscope was described and published by the Journal of the Franklin Institute. Time does not permit me to describe all of the many instruments that I designed and constructed. The micromanipulator was used to dissect and operate on cells. The spectrometer was used to measure the angle of crystals. The frequency instruments were used to kill bacteria, virus, and fungi. The microscopes of the prismatic virus were used to study living virus, bacteria, and fungi. A petrographical micropolariscope was used to analyze chemicals in color frequencies with polarized light. Special rare gas glass-contained atmospheres were used to provide ionized radiation to transmit energy to increase virulence and to devitalize all microorganisms as desired. 20. Which pathogenic organisms did you study in virus form? Cancer virus, typhoid, tuberculosis virus, herpes virus, E. coli virus, poliomyelitis virus, and about 40 other viruses that have never been isolated before. 21. How did you obtain these viruses? From pure cultures of known and medical diagnosed tissues of human disease filtered through porcelain Berkefeld filters. 22. Describe your experiments by which you isolated these viruses. After the filtered form was obtained, a micropipette is used to place a drop of the fluid on a slide. This slide is placed on the microscope stage of any of the 5 virus microscopes that I designed and built. A special Beasley prism which works on a counter-rotation principle selects a portion of the light frequency which illuminates these virus in their own characteristic chemical colors by emission of coordinated light frequency, and the virus become readily identifiable by the colors revealed on observation. 8,000 to 17,000 x magnification is sufficient to see them. Before building the virus prismatic microscopes, I sectioned over 15,000 slides trying all types of acid and aniline dye strains with no results over a period of 10 years. 23. How did you determine whether these viruses were pathogenic? By animal tests and from known sources, and by microscope examination which reveals the true identity of microorganisms to the trained observer. 24. Describe your experiments made to prove that these viruses were pathogenic. On one series of cancer tests, I inoculated the virus which I had isolated and filtered from an unulcerated breast mass into an albino rat. The tumor was allowed to grow, and then I surgically removed the tumor and again isolated and filtered the virus from a portion of the ground-up tumor and inoculated the next rat, and repeated this procedure 411 times to prove that this virus was the causative agent of cancer. Tests on many other diseases such as those previously mentioned are too numerous to even start on at this time. 25. About how long a period of time did your work study of these viruses, and proof of their pathogenic character, cover? 15 years on virus only. 26. Did you also study bacterial forms of pathogenic organisms associated with these viruses? Yes. 27. Did you find whether some bacteria were capable of releasing a form of virus? Yes. Viruses are released from bacteria just as a chicken lays an egg. 28. How did you determine this? By virus observation and cell study and virus photographs which I made, and one which John Crane made from a film of cancer virus which has been copyrighted. 29. What are some of the bacteria which you found to be capable of releasing a form of virus? Bacillus coli, tuberculosis, typhoid, and many others. 30. Were certain kinds of culture media better suited than others to the study of the relationship between the bacteria and virus forms? A media developed by Arthur I. Kendall known as K media proves superior to other types of bacteria media. 31. If so, why, or in what way, were some culture media superior to others for this purpose? Because of the results obtained. 32. Were any physicians or scientists associated with you in any of these studies? Yes. 33. Who were they? Milbank Johnson, M.D., Arthur I. Kendall, Ph.D., E.C. Rosenau, M.D., Coolidge of General Electric, O.C. Grunner, M.D., Henry Seiner, Dr. Kopp, M.D., Alvin G. Ford, M.D., Ernest Linwood Walker, M.D., and Carl Meyer, M.D., of the Hooper Foundation of San Francisco, George Dock, M.D., Waylon Morrison, M.D., Dr. Fisher, M.D., Vern Thompson, Ben Cohen, Ray Lounsbury, M.D., James B. Cush, M.D., Charles F. Tully, D.D.S., Arthur Yale, M.D., R.T. Hammer, M.D., John Crane, Dave Sawyer, Don Tully, J. Heidker, M.D., Royal Lee, Ph.D., T.O. Berger, M.D., Alice Kendall and many others. 34. Where did they work with you? Work was conducted in various laboratories, offices, and buildings in San Diego and in the United States. I traveled all over the world and many doctors and scientists and executives visited me at my various laboratories including the Rife Research Laboratory, the Point Loma Lab set up at Dr. Tully's, the Rife Virus Microscope Institute, and another microscope and darkroom facility at San Diego, and I furnished free of charge to the police crime laboratory thousands of dollars worth of chemicals, precision instruments, electronic instruments, and training in microscope techniques and laboratory diagnosis and other equipment and glassware. After I closed the Rife Research Laboratory in 1946, another laboratory for research work on seawater conversion was set up and used at the foot of Canyon Street in Point Loma. 35. What part did they have in any of these experiments or studies? Initially the work and the origin was developed under my control and guidance. Later their work became an interest of collaboration and observation of the results attained. Initially I worked with loose couplers to get an audio oscillation, and then with the use of transmitters, I tried to balance the audio and modulate the audio on a carrier wave to transmit the audio energy, but I found that both the audio and the audio transmitted through a tube as an antenna worked equally as well in a painless and harmless method to human tissue. Coolidge furnished many tubes. Milbank Johnson, a multimillionaire, set up and supervised 3 human research clinics. The first clinic was set up under a special medical research committee of the University of Southern California with Dr. Rufus B. von Klein-Smith on the committee in the home of Ellen Scripps in La Jolla in 1934. Johnson selected outstanding doctors to aid us in the clinical work such as Docks, Morrison, Ford, Meyer, Kendall, Rosenau, Fisher of the Children's Hospital in New York, and others helping or observing were Heidker, Lounsbury, Kopp, Alice Kendall, Henry Seiner, Grunner, Berger, Hammer, Cush, Yale, and Cohen. Walker and I studied leprosy, and I isolated a virus which we jointly demonstrated was common to rat, soil, and human leprosy, and I found a frequency which would eliminate leprosy. Dr. Glonin MD visited me, and I sent Henry Seiner to demonstrate a virus microscope in England to the medical profession there. Alice Kendall worked for me in the lab, and so did Henry Seiner and others. From 1950 and on, John Crane has continued on with this research. The others were visitors and interested parties. Many others have aided in promotion of this research, and the AMA has suppressed all effort and research knowledge of my developments. 36. Did you grow bacteria and viruses in various culture media? Yes. 37. How did you determine what they were? They can readily be diagnosed by their own true colors, which are emitted when placed in any of the 5 virus microscopes that I designed and built for this virus identification and study. 38. What study and experience did you have in the science of optics before commencing these experiments? I studied for 6 years with Hans Luckel, who was Carl Zeiss's optical scientist and researcher. I also made all the photomicrographs for the Atlas of Parasites, which was done at the University of Heidelberg. I also studied eye surgery for 2 years. 39. Over about what period of time had you made such study and gained this experience? 9 years before commencing on my own research. 40. Did you find ordinary microscopes, such as are obtainable from commercial sources, adequate for the study of these viruses? No. 41. In what ways were they deficient? They have insufficient power, poor detail and definition, and poor resolution, and cannot illuminate the virus with selective frequency or frequencies of monochromatic beam light, which is required to see virus. Control of the light is very important. 42. What types of microscope did you find necessary to complete your study of these viruses? Prismatic virus microscopes, which I designed and built for virus study and research only. I have never tried to commercialize on these instruments. They were offered to Bosch and Lum, but they couldn't justify the cost of tooling to build these complex instruments, and the doctors could not afford to buy them either because they would have been too expensive for the average laboratory to even consider. 43. In what ways did they differ from the commercially available types? In the barrel were prisms which transmitted the light. The stage had to be leveled, and a series of condenser lenses between the patented microscope lamp of mine and the Risley prism were located below the stage. Special lens spacings were important to compensate for the extra long tube length of 220 and 440 mm, and a higher degree of accuracy in stage adjustments was provided. In the universal microscope, 7 turns of the dial moved the object under study 1 micron. Slit ultra-illumination was also provided. Wright's patented lamp Rife's condenser. 44. Did you obtain the kinds of special microscopes you found to be necessary? Yes. 45. How did you obtain them? I built many, and I purchased some and had them built to my specifications. 46. What types were they? Standard research types, prismatic virus types, crystallographic, petrographical micropolariscope, polarized, and historical types. 47. What did these special microscopes do which the commercially available types would not do as well? Show virus and allow us to study them alive and identify them as virus and allow us to diagnose them as to the disease of which they caused and were associated. 48. What is necessary? In order to make bacteria and viruses visible under the microscope, first there must be high enough power to enable the observer to see them, and second they must be identified by a frequency of light which coordinates with the chemical constituents of the virus or filterable form in question. To my knowledge, there is only one instrument today which will even show these virus, and that is the Rife prismatic virus microscopes which I built for this work. The electron microscope is a useless device for this study because the virus are killed instantly and you don't know what form you are seeing them in, and generally appear as round balls of dried up chemical particles. 49. What different methods of staining bacteria and viruses are in common use? Acid and aniline dye strains of many formulae are commercially available. 50. Did you find these common methods of staining sufficient for the experiments you performed? No. 51. If not, what were their deficiencies? They would not show the flagella, or the virus. 52. Did you devise another method of staining or making visible bacteria and viruses? Yes. 53. What was this method? I had devised a stain with alfalfa hay and mercury for flagella on B. coli and typhoid to count their concentration. Virus were made visible for the first time with a variable light frequency controlled by a Risley prism of a counter-rotating nature, an iris diaphragm, condenser lenses, and other features previously mentioned. 54. Explain how it was done. By rotation and variable monochromatic beam adjustment of the Rife prismatic virus microscopes. 55. How did you obtain the instruments necessary to do this? I built them in my research laboratory, which is shown in movies that John Crane has at RVMI. 56. What study and experience have you had in the science of bacteriology? I study bacteriology at Johns Hopkins University and the University of Heidelberg and in my own research laboratory. 57. Over about what period of time did you get this study and experience? 40 years. 58. Besides studying bacteria and viruses growing in culture media, did you also make any study of their effects upon laboratory animals inoculated with such bacteria or viruses? Yes. 59. What kinds of animal were used in such experiments? Albino rats, guinea pigs, rabbits. I had about 800 rats which were used constantly. 60. Where were such experiments performed? In the Rife Research Laboratory in Point Loma. 61. Under whose direction? Under my direction. 62. Did any other scientists or physicians assist you in any of these studies of inoculated laboratory animals? No, but I had men that worked for me and helped me. 63. Did any other scientists observe, without actually assisting, any of these studies or experiments? Yes. Dr. Kendall, Grunner, Johnson, Kusch, Kopp, Lounsbury, Berger, Siner, Cullen, Ford, Rosenau, Karlmeyer, Walker, and others as stated before. 64. Who were they? No answer given. 65. What part did they take in such studies? By bringing cancer tissue, collaborating results, by using the virus microscopes and observing my results and observations, by growing virus and by conducting clinical tests on virus, bacteria and fungi on cultures and human cases or patients for their own research and knowledge. 66. As a result of such studies, did you and Dr. Arthur I. Kendall publish a report of some of your experiments or studies of filterable forms of Bacillus typhosus? Yes. 67. Was this report published in California and Western Medicine, the Journal of the California Medical Association, in the December, 1931, issue? Yes. 68. Is this a copy of the article? Attaches Defendant's Exhibit A. Yes. Click here to read this report, PDF 1.2 megabytes. 69. Was this Dr. Arthur Isaac Kendall, Ph.D., at that time the Director of Medical Research of Northwestern University Medical School? Yes. 70. In July, 1932, did you continue some of this study of bacteria and viruses with Dr. Isaac Kendall in his laboratory at Northwestern University Medical School? Yes. 71. At that time, did Dr. E.C. Rosenau, M.D., of the Division of Experimental Bacteriology of the Mayo Clinic, Rochester, Minnesota, observe some of this study made at Northwestern University Medical School, in Dr. Kendall's laboratory? Yes. 72. Did Dr. Rosenau publish a report of this study in the July 1932 issue of the Mayo Clinic Bulletin? Yes. 73. Is this a copy of this publication of Dr. Rosenau's article? Attaches Defendant's Exhibit B. Yes. Click here to read this report courtesy of Stanley Truman of www.rife.org. 74. About when did you begin your experiments in the effect of electronic frequencies upon bacteria and viruses? 1920. 75. How did you obtain the device or mechanism used to generate such frequencies? Some coils I wound myself. Other parts I purchased. 76. How did you determine whether particular frequencies had any effect upon bacteria or viruses? By observation with bacteria and virus under the Rife virus prismatic microscopes in conjunction with the application of electronic energy. 77. Were you able to kill or deactivate any bacteria or viruses by the application to them of electronic currents or rays? Yes. 78. Can you name some of the bacteria and viruses which you were able to kill or deactivate by such means? Tetanus, typhoid, gonorrhea, treponema pallidum, staphylococci, pneumonia, streptothrix, bacillus coli, tuberculosis, streptococci, sarcoma, carcinoma, and many others. It was found that by using combinations of these frequencies for the different microorganisms that many other diseases could be helped, like sinus, ulcers, cataract, arthritis, poliomyelitis, etc. 79. Is there a distinction between the terms kill and deactivate as you have used them? That is to say, were any of these viruses or bacteria deprived of their virulent activity without having to completely kill them? Yes. On some research it was found that after transfer to another media no further reproduction would occur. 80. After treatment of viruses or bacteria by the application to them of certain electronic currents or rays, as you have mentioned, was there ever any change in the appearance of such bacteria or viruses as seen under your microscope? If so, describe it. Yes. Some types will explode or disintegrate and some will gather together like log jams or agglutinate. 81. Were you acquainted with Dr. Milbank Johnson, M.D., during this period? Yes. 82. Did he participate in any of your experiments or studies on the effect of electronic frequencies upon bacteria and viruses? Yes. 83. Did he participate in any of your experiments or studies on the effect of these electronic frequencies upon laboratory animals which had been inoculated with various diseases? Yes. 84. Did you furnish one of your electronic frequency generators to Dr. Milbank Johnson for his use? Yes. 85. Over about what period of time did he use it? 8 years. 86. Where did he make use of it? In the Santa Fe Hospital in Los Angeles and the private clinic in Pasadena. 87. Was this electronic frequency generator used by him or under his direction in the treatment of diseases of human patients? Yes. 88. Did he report to you the result of these treatments? Yes. 89. Did you observe the giving of any of these treatments? Yes. 90. Did you observe the results of these treatments? Yes. 91. What changes did you observe in the condition of any of the patients so treated by Dr. Milbank Johnson with the instruments you had furnished to him? Describe them in detail. I observed some cataract cases, etc. 92. During the period of time when Dr. Milbank Johnson was so using your electronic frequency generator, were you acquainted with Dr. James B. Cush, M.D., now deceased? Yes. 93. Did Dr. James B. Cush participate in the work of Dr. Milbank Johnson in the treatment of human patients with the frequency generator? Yes. 94. Did you furnish Dr. James B. Cush, M.D., with one of your electronic frequency generators for his own use? Yes. The Beamray Corporation built 2 instruments for Dr. Cush. 95. When did Dr. Milbank Johnson die? 1942. 96. Was the work of Dr. Milbank Johnson in treating human patients with your frequency generator continued after his death? Yes. 97. Did Dr. James B. Cush continue to use the frequency generator which you had furnished to him? If so, until about what date? Yes. Until he died in 1959. 98. About when did Dr. James B. Cush die? In the spring of 1959. 99. Did Dr. James B. Cush report to you the results of his use of your electronic frequency generator? Yes. 100. Did you observe any of the treatments given by Dr. James B. Cush with your electronic frequency generator? Yes. 101. Did you observe the results of any of the treatments given by Dr. James B. Cush with your electronic frequency generator? Yes. 102. What changes did you observe in the condition of any of the human patients who had been so treated with your frequency generator by Dr. James B. Cush? I saw cancer and tuberculosis cases that had completely recovered. I saw Dr. Couch's brother who had come over from England. He had a 30-year sinus condition with terrible drainage. Dr. Cush used the frequency instrument on him and he was well in 3 weeks. Dr. Cush had treated Dr. Hammer, M.D., for a sinus condition which cleared up. Dr. Cush had treated Dr. Butterfield, M.D.'s brother-in-law who had a stiff wrist, a tuberculosis of the bone which cleared up. Also I saw a Mexican boy who had osteomyelitis of the bone which Dr. Cush cleared up with the frequency instrument. I saw George Lem being treated by Dr. Cush for tuberculosis and he had come out from Chicago to die. He was sent from the Volklane home. As soon as they found out that Cush was getting results, they tried to get all of their patients back but Lem said no, that he was going to finish up with Cush and he completely recovered. 103. Did you furnish Dr. Arthur W. Yale, M.D., now deceased, with one of your electronic frequency generators? If so, about when? Yes. He ordered an instrument from the Beamray Corporation in 1937. 104. Did Dr. Arthur W. Yale furnish you with any reports of the results of his treatment of human patients with your electronic frequency generator device? Yes. 105. Did you observe the results of any of the treatments given by Dr. Arthur W. Yale? Yes. 106. Did you observe the condition of any of Dr. Arthur W. Yale's patients after they had been treated by him with your electronic frequency generator? If so, what change, if any, in their condition did you observe? Yes. They completely recovered from syphilis, cancer, tuberculosis, and many other infections. 107. Did you perform any experiments on laboratory animals which had been inoculated with any diseases, to determine the effect upon such animals of treatment with your electronic frequency generator? Yes. 108. What kind of animals did you use? Albino rats, rabbits, guinea pigs. 109. With what diseases were these animals inoculated? Sarcoma, carcinoma, tuberculosis, typhoid, etc. 110. Were any of these animals inoculated with cancer in any form? Yes. 111. Describe in detail the experiments with your electronic frequency generator. Before the animal was inoculated, a quarantine period of 2 weeks was observed with stool analysis and metabolism checkup made to be sure that the animal was free of disease and in good health. On one series of cancer tests, I inoculated the cancer virus that I isolated from an unulcerated human breast mass into an albino rat and grew the tumor. I surgically removed this tumor and again isolated the virus and inoculated the next rat. I did this 411 times on one series of tests to prove that the BX or the virus which I had isolated was in reality the causative agent of cancer. This procedure is shown in a documentary film which John Crane has of this work, and it also shows the virus of cancer before and after devitalization with a Rife frequency instrument. An air bubble is shown coming into the cover slip because I had not sealed it. We also did a great deal of work on tuberculosis with animals and proved that the rod form and the virus form must both be devitalized to attain results, which requires 2 frequencies, one for each form, before recovery can occur. The treatment for all of the diseases proved successful and hundreds of tests were conducted on each disease with adequate controls before the critical frequencies were established. 112. Did you compare the subsequent condition of the animal so treated with your frequency generator with the condition of control animals which had been inoculated with disease but not treated with your frequency generator? If so, describe the difference, if any, which you observed in their condition. Yes. The inoculated controls died and the controls which were not inoculated were not affected. 113. About how many experiments of this kind did you make? 50,000. Note on the original document 100,000 had been typewritten, crossed out, and 50,000 added by hand animal tests, and 415,000 typewritten, crossed out, and 400 written by hand test tubes daily on my experiments. 114. Over about what period of time did you conduct these experiments? 26 years. 115. Did you find, from these experiments, that it made any difference which particular frequency you used in the treatment of any certain disease? Yes. 116. Did any disease respond exactly the same to all frequencies or a wide variety of frequencies? If so, which one? No. 117. Were you able to determine whether each kind of bacteria or virus which you tested was affected most by some particular frequency? Yes. 118. What happened when you used a different frequency on it? It was not affected. 119. Did you make a moving picture showing the interior of your laboratory and some of its equipment? Yes. 120. Did this moving picture also show some of your experimental work on laboratory animals? Yes. Some cancer work is shown. 121. In this moving picture, who is the person shown performing surgical operations on laboratory animals? I performed all surgery at the Rife Research Laboratory. 122. Who now has this moving picture? Did you give it to him? John Crane. Yes. Rife Lab video narrated by John Crane. 123. Did you ever explain to John F. Crane, one of the defendants in this case, the principles upon which your electronic frequency generator is used in the treatment of diseases? Yes, in 1950. 124. Did you also inform him of the particular frequencies which you had found to be effective in the treatment of various diseases? Yes. Vern Thompson and I gave the frequencies to John Crane. 125. When did you furnish him with this information? In 1950. 126. Did you ever request any governmental department or agency to make a test of your electronic frequency generator to determine its effect upon diseases? If so, which one or ones? Yes. The Department of Health, Education and Welfare and the National Research Council Committee on Growth, Washington, D.C., the American Cancer Society, the Damon Runyon Fund, the Sloan Kettering Institute, the International Cancer Clinic and many others. They have shown no interest in an electronic method. 127. Did any one of them express willingness to make such a test, or even to observe such a test? If so, which one? Yes. The American Cancer Society was interested until they found out that John Crane and I are not medical doctors, and then they called John Crane from New York and stated that they had decided to cancel the proposed project, which would have shown them how to isolate the virus, make it virulent, grow the cancer tumors, and how to electronically eliminate the cancer. They spend millions on drugs but nothing on electronics unless it will supplement drugs like X-ray and radioactive treatments, which put terrible scar tissue and burns inside the body, and then the person has to have a great amount of dope and painkillers to keep the pain down. The drug racketeer makes $10 billion annually on cancer alone, and with this money they have been able to have an unconstitutional law put on the books which stated that people will only be treated for cancer by medical doctors with X-ray, radioactive treatments, and surgery, creating a drug monopoly to kill cancer slowly. 128. Did any one of them ever actually make a test of your electronic frequency generator, using the frequencies which you had found to be effective, so far as you know? No. 129. Did you ever request any medical school to make a test of your electronic frequency generator, using the frequencies which you had found to be effective? Yes. 130. Other than the work of the special committee under Dr. Milbank Johnson, did any medical school express a willingness to make such a test? Yes. Work was done at the Hooper Foundation of the University of California and at Northwestern University Medical School in Chicago by Ernest Linwood Walker and Arthur I. Kendall. 131. Did you ever request any medical society to make a test of your electronic frequency generator, using the frequencies which you had found to be effective? If so, which one or ones? Yes. The American Medical Association. 132. Did any medical society express a willingness to make, or to observe such a test? No. 133. So far as you know, has any medical society ever made a test of your electronic frequency generator, using the frequencies which you had found to be effective? No. 134. Have you ever made or observed a test of the effect of the electronic frequency generators, of the type produced by John F. Crane, one of the defendants in this case? If so, tell us the kind of test or tests, who made such a test or tests, and what result you observed. Yes. I saw the instrument kill earthworms, Bacillus coli and others. I showed John Crane how to accomplish this work. Note the text starting with Bacillus coli was obviously added later using a different typewriter. 135. Have you been awarded a research fellowship in biochemistry by any nationally known institute for scientific research? Yes. 136. What is the name of it? Andean Anthropological Expedition. 137. Is this a copy of the award, together with a copy of the covering letter or transmittal from the Andean Anthropological Expedition? Attaches Defendant's Exhibit C. Yes. Thank you to Peter Walker archiving this information at www.rife.d.